Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have a guest who is very close to my heart. He and I study the same stuff, very similar topics. He is Dr. Joe Malone, and he is, I'll make sure I get this right, PhD in health and human performance, and he specializes in women's health. I'm sure your wife is happy about that, right? It's women's health and sexual wellness. And you have spoken all over the place, including Princeton, Vanderbilt, Catholic University of America. And speaking of that, you are a Catholic man married to the same woman for over 47 years. And this is a topic we're talking about today that we are both very passionate of. By the way, he is an author. And if you could hold that book up, Joe, he was even on my show talking about this book, Battles of the Sexes. And I want you to go listen to that podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes of this one. What's the tagline on that one,
It
Joe?
is raising sexual IQ to lower sexual conflict and empower lasting love.
I knew it was something cool. I couldn't remember. Yeah, and so today we're going to take that conversation that we had a little further, and we really want to talk because you've got another book coming out very soon, but kind of leading in that direction. I think we should talk about what you said, what women need to know about men, and then a little bit about what men need to know about women. If we have time for that in this conversation, we may make it two shows. But also, what do we need to know about ourselves? We tend to think we know ourselves well, but we don't. So before you answer any of that, welcome. Thanks for making time for me and my viewers.
Oh, thanks for having me, Christine. It's always a pleasure and an honor.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, how does a man like you get into a topic like women's sexual wellness? And then we'll go into what women need to know about men.
That's a great question. And actually the answer to it is God's providence, because I never planned to get into this. But to make a really long story short, I was interested in stopping the health problems that I was dealing with as a personal trainer and a fitness industry manager in the 90s and early 2000s, and learned that young women's health at the time that they carry their babies and the babies are born, their health state, their muscles, bone, and fat, the quality of that affects the baby's lifetime wellness and health. So I created a program at the university I was at. I was teaching that and got a PhD around trying to maximize young women's, in this case, college women's health. Along the way, though, I interviewed 32 of them and had 10 focus groups, 10 different classes that expressed problems with their exercise, problems with their nutrition on campus, but this other huge problem that I had no idea was going on, hookup culture, that turned my head around as far as realizing that the things I had anticipated as being the biggest problems were still problems, but this other one, this lack of relationships and this mess really that I discovered that they were going through in hookup culture, getting their hearts broken and their anxiety levels raised, their depression levels raised, suicidal thoughts, that type of thing. I realized that that was more important. So I got the permission from the powers that be, where I was, to go down that pathway, and then ended up, God just ended up taking me down the pathway. And I ended up with the pro-life movement and just all kinds of different people I didn't realize were out there that were working on this problem of casual sex in our society and the lack of love and romance and traditional courtship, traditional marriage, traditional family. So glad to be here, but wasn't really planning on it, so became
Well,
yeah, yeah.
no, I was gonna say it's just amazing that God takes somebody like you and says, this is important. Let's get this out there because we're screwed up.
Yeah.
We're not, we
Screwed
need
up
to
is a
know
great way
this.
to put it. It is,
Yeah.
and it's a sad thing, but there's just so much potential for improvement. And really, the great thing is that it's all there, in God's design and God's word and the church's teaching. But it's also, our parents and grandparents. 1960, we only had 5% of our babies being born out of wedlock, for one thing, and we had 75% of people who were 18 or over were married, and then we had 3 times as many 20 to 29-year-old young people that were married back then than are now. So one of the biggest things that I found that is, potentiates, so to speak, this situation with hookup culture and casual sex and polyamory and all of it is so many young people not being married, where they probably would have been before. So we got 52%, no, I'm sorry, 48% that are married now that are above 18 as opposed to 75% in
Well,
1960. So Christine, we've got examples in the past, and the other thing I like to get across to folks is that, in studying this, history in general is a cycle. There's cycles. It goes back and forth and back and forth. It isn't a straight line, linear change from good in the past to bad in the future. It's the pendulum swung back and forth 3 times in the last 350 years, and I feel that and not just I feel, but I've got evidence that that the pendulum swing is starting to swing back in the sexual integrity direction as opposed to sexual anarchy. So that's kind of a
praise
long answer to
God.
your question. Yeah, praise God. But that's kind of what brought me to this. And in going through my research, I ended up coming to the conclusion as I looked at it that there were several key things that young women need to know about young men and young men need to know about young women. The same things you were just saying. So I kind of organized it in that way. And if you want to, we can run through some of that today.
I really would. So like, I've got 5 grandsons, so I don't even know. It's like, maybe let's start with that. What do women need to know about men? Because I'm watching these young boys grow up, and some of them are already young men.
Mhm.
What would I need to know about them? What would their future wives need to know about them? What do we need to know about our husbands?
At the stage that they're at where they're single, I think these things are very important to know. And then also going forward, of course, after you get married too, it's important to know as well. But especially when they're trying to find a mate. Coincidentally, I have 5 grandsons as well.
Oh, do
So
you? I only
one
have
grand,
one granddaughter, though. What do you got?
I've got one granddaughter.
You're same
Yeah,
as me?
yeah,
5 and 1? Oh, that's
5 and 1,
fantastic.
6 altogether. So
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Not many females in our bunch, but
I'm hoping we get
anyway,
at least one priest out of the bunch. That's just
yes,
me.
yeah. Let's hope so. So what do women need to know about men? Well, the first one thing that's really important is that young women need to realize that by playing this hookup culture game, they're really destroying their chances for getting a husband or even a long-term, relationship, because there is a hormone called vasopressin that, and again, I'm gonna make these things fairly quick because I know we have a short amount of time.
That's okay. But that's the monogamy hormone, right?
That is, and I think we might have discussed that last time. But if anybody that didn't hear about it,
Tell us all about it.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's in the male's brain, and it's in there as long as they're around a young woman they're attracted to, they're that type of thing. They're having a good time, and generally, it's in the old days, it was the romantic date and spending time with each other. It didn't really matter what they were doing, and if that vasopressin is in there long enough, and we're talking about months at least. I always get that question on campuses. How long, Dr. Malone? I hate giving it up, but it's 4 months actually, at least
If
four
it's
months.
in where? If it's
If,
in
if,
their
if it's
brains, if it's
yeah, if it's,
elevated?
if it's in the brain, elevated, yes, and it creates its own like most chemicals in the brain. It creates its own receptor system. So once that happens, and we got receptors again, a million times bigger than it actually is, but that's how it's shaped. And then the molecule eventually docks with it, and then there's millions of those receptors and molecules. That's when a young man falls in love, what we call falls in love or bonds. At that point, it causes his testosterone, which has been high because he's around this attractive girl, to drop a little bit. And when that happens, his oxytocin, which is the other bonding chemical that is more profound in women, it locks as well. So he has fallen in love at that point. But if during the course of this vasopressin, attraction, dating, courtship, old school approach, if there is casual sex and orgasm is reached by the young man, then he has what happens in the brain is that cascade of chemicals, serotonin, oxytocin, and especially opioids at orgasm, blow the vasopressin out of the brain, and so he never bonds as he should, as they did in the old days, our parents and grandparents days. And then he just goes on to the next one and the next one, next one. That's the reason I was experiencing the young women I was dealing with, all their problems, all their heartbreak and all that. Because on the other hand, they do bond they bond readily when there's a sexual situation, even to orgasm, because they just men require dopamine, vasopressin, and testosterone to bond. Women only need to have dopamine and oxytocin, and there's plenty of that secreted during sexual situations. So the classic situation is women bonding and men not. So the big thing that girls and young women need to know is that the old school approach, the Catholic approach, particularly of non-marital chastity, is extremely effective in, if they want to become a married woman, they need to go down that pathway. That's the
They
reason
want a man committed to them. So I wasn't
Yeah.
clear on this. So when the man has this elevated vasopressin,
Mhm.
and so then how does the orgasm in a hookup change versus the climax in a married situation? I just want to be clear so I can explain it again.
Yeah, in a marriage situation, presumably, marriage situation won't happen unless there is that
The
that
commitment's already there.
yeah, and get the commitment, you need the time period of non-sexual activity, just romantic, activity, and being around each other and bonding that way. So
So if we're bonding, my husband and I were dating and his vasopressin is increasing and his
mm,
testosterone drops, right? And then so the oxytocin, which is a cuddle hormone, makes him more romantically attracted to me. So if I don't give him sex and he just really wants it because the vasopressin makes him hyper focused on the object of his affection, which in this case is me, you're saying that it's that combination of the oxytocin wanting to bond with me, staying at that level for such a long time because he's trying to get me, he's trying to win me. And
right,
that's the part that really bonds us. And then so as soon as he has orgasm, so let's say, with a ring on or ring not, once he has orgasm, the bonding drops. But if I already have the ring and he's committed to me, it
yeah,
sounds bad to say he's stuck, but I waited till I got the bond and the commitment before he got that part, which is automatically going to drop these hormones in the male. And you're saying if in a hookup, he doesn't have to build that oxytocin bonding hormone. He just has the orgasm, never needs to bond, so he's able to move on. Did
yeah,
I say that right?
yeah, it's both the oxytocin and the vasopressin. So it's the
Okay.
vasopressin first. The vasopressin first needs to, do its thing as far as docking, you would call it, and locking and bonding, and that allows the testosterone to go down because vasopressin is the main male bonding chemical, and oxytocin is a secondary male bonding chemical. So it allows that testosterone to be pushed down, and then the oxytocin docks and locks as well. So you have it essentially right. The key thing is for young single women to realize that the urban legend that's out there right now. I've had a ton of young women tell me this, that Dr. Malone, I can't get a guy, and my so and so, even parents told them this. I can't get a guy these days if I don't have sex with him before we get serious, because they'll never get serious with me if I don't have sex with him, because all these other girls are. And what I end up telling them is what we're talking about, that actually it's the opposite from that. If you don't have sex with him, what you described just a minute ago, Christine, that bonding mechanism, which in the male, I need to be clear, is much more complex than it is in the female, and it takes more time, and it takes more um, the situation to be right, as I described it, which happens to be the old school courtship, chaste courtship, and that type of thing. So, and if that bonding then takes place, then as you were alluding in your marriage situation, the man's already bonded in the I guess you'd say orthodox marriage situation, which would happen with this courtship I'm describing, that would be a chaste courtship, and then again, ideally, the first sex to orgasm would be in the wedding night. So from that point forward,
So he's bonded, and then he's like, let me put a ring on it. I'm so bonded to you.
yeah,
I've been chasing you, pursuing you, which by the way, the structural and hormonal differences in the male brain is like that they're wired for pursuit. And that's what I'm kind of hearing. He's
yeah,
got to try to win you. So I want this bonding, 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 bonding. And then, what do you call
Y-
it? Locked and loaded or?
Yeah,
you
and
know?
yeah, and he's doing what he has to do, to acquire what he wants, and she's doing the smart thing. I always the pro-life people and I always call this a superpower, the female superpower, because as you said just a minute ago, males are more wired and chemistry to go after it because
Yeah.
they have 20 times more testosterone on average. They have three areas of their brain that are twice as large that have to do with sexual pursuit and sex drive. Three areas. One is the
Hypothalamus?
yeah, they're two of them are in the hypothalamus.
Oh,
One
okay.
is the
I'll shut up.
no, that's okay. Medial preoptic area. They call it MPOA, and by just as it alludes, it's right here behind where the optical
Nerve.
the where you're seeing goes into the brain, and so
Okay.
that's one reason that males have a tendency, again, remember, it's twice as big, has twice as many neurons in it, twice as packed densely as the females. So men are more visual just because
Yeah.
of that in general, as far as sex goes. Another area of the hypothalamus is the what they call the INAH3. INAH3. It's the third interstitial nucleus of the hypothalamus. That's what INAH3 means. It's twice as big. It's twice as packed. Then the third part is everybody's probably heard of this, the amygdala. The amygdala
The
is
emotion
twice.
center.
Yeah, and the brain's command and control survival area. So when it
Wait, the
gives
man's amygdala is bigger than the woman's? She's more emotional, but you're
well, it was twice as big in the man, and it all three of these, as I'm going to tell you, are sensitive to testosterone levels, and again, the males have 20 times as much testosterone. So in both the males and the females, the amygdala is its main job is to be the command and control center for survival. So it's where it is very emotional, as you said, and
yeah.
especially fear
But your
and
fight or flight comes from there then, right?
correct. So and also, and again, a strong immediate sex drive would come from it, especially in the males, and less so in the females. Females do a lot of their processing in their brain as far as sex goes in what we call the ventro, that's with a V is in very, ventromedial hypothalamus. So it's another part of the hypothalamus, and in it, three things are processed, and so this is kind of a mixture of things. It's love, lust, and food, appetite for food, and battles of the sexes. That's one of that's one of the battles that the women have to fight. Is that their amygdalas are more stoked, I guess you'd say, and stimulated by food in many cases than sexual
Uh,
stimuli.
Men
And
always wonder, like, what? I can walk past her naked and she's still not turned on. It's like, yeah, but give me
yeah,
that cherry pie over there and I'm going to be happy.
yeah, and there's reasons for that, of course. I'm going back into our ancestry, but and the other thing is that females have 13 times more SHBG, and what that is sex hormone binding globulin, which is what it binds to your testosterone, your free testosterone, and makes it not free, and makes it not able to be used in the cells as well as estrogen. And so, all those things said, back to your statement earlier, where you said that men are more made for going after sex, and women, you're describing your husband's situation and and then your women are more equipped to be able to walk away from it. Basically, it's very, very true that, and there's exceptions to that rule, because there's about 15% of women, because of in utero exposure to higher levels of testosterone than your typical girl has, they end up coming out with more of a male organized brain than other women. But you got 85% of women that are reacting the way that I'm talking about here. They can take sex or leave it. They don't look at sex for sex sake the same way that men do. So women need to know this about men, and the difference, and they need to realize that the one other thing, men are deep down inside, they are categorizing women into two categories when they're dating, when they're doing this dance, so to speak, this sexual dance. The women that are readily available and willing to have sex, they're categorizing them into for a good time only. The ones that aren't, the ones that are practicing chastity and demand chastity from the men, are categorized into a marriage
Potential
possibility.
wife, yeah.
Yeah,
potential.
because and it's not, again on campuses, the urban legend there is that men are horrible people, they're just terrible human
Right.
beings. But actually, from the dawn of time, from the beginning, from Adam and Eve forward, men have always had to be in mystery in one way or the other of who the father of the baby that their wife was carrying
Right.
was. So there's this thing called paternity certainty that men carry around, and so a woman that they're dating, that they're having, that they're interacting with romantically, if they are very reticent, I guess you'd say, to have sex, and especially readily, and that type of thing, and put across that, hey, sex is for marriage, that type of thing, because of paternity certainty, because of internal fertilization and gestation that we have as a species, and because he wants to know that she's going to
That's
be.
his child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, for a marriage partner, the number one and number two out of 67 characteristics that men are looking for, number one is sexual loyalty. Number two is sexual integrity. So women, girls and young women, anybody that's listening to this and anybody that knows one, need to get the information to them, get this knowledge across to them that if you have a desire for marrying, and when I did my own research on my 438 of my college students at the secular college, 97.48% of them want to get married someday. So if you want to get married, the young women that are kind of in control of this, because once they once they lay that law out there, which is going to be very rare these days,
Yeah.
they're gonna they're
Yeah.
gonna get they're gonna get men's attention. So there's there's a paternity certainty on the side of the men, and then balanced against that is the female choice, which most species practice. And female choice is such that yes, they're looking for this good-looking guy, they're looking for the great genetics and that type of thing, tall, dark, and handsome. But they're also looking for a guy that's going to be, a good husband, a good father. They're interested in, is he intelligent? Is he funny? And what is he, a nice person? That type of thing. So is he going to be there when I'm pregnant, and
Yeah.
when the family is being built? So there's all of those things. And just to finish this thing off, we've got studies that show that this is really a sticky little saying, but along the lines of the how quick sex happens in a relationship. The shorter the time to sex in a relationship, the shorter the relationship. I'll say that one more time. The shorter the time to sex. So in other words, like first date versus 6 months later or a year later in marriage,
Right.
the shorter the time to relationship in sex, I mean, to sex in marriage, to sex in a relationship, the shorter the relationship. Now, last thing, within 10 seconds after, let's just say a hookup, or this couple that hardly know each other have had sex, and usually there's alcohol involved. By the way, 2/3 of the time there's alcohol involved. Um, within 10 seconds, the male's his thoughts about her
Attraction. Yeah.
attraction is going down. She's not as pretty. She's not as smart. She's not as funny, etc. And because he's not bonded, he hasn't had that vasopressin bonding system that we talked about. And then she has bonded more than likely because it's just the dopamine and the oxytocin. And so he's actually getting better looking. He's smarter. He's funnier, etc. So it's so the church's approach, the old school, dating, chase dating, engagement, marriage. The reason it worked as well as it did is because
It was
it had that
right.
yeah, it is right, and it
It
had that
matched up with biology.
correct. So that's kind of there's like some important things that's probably the most important thing that young women need to know about young men today is
Wow.
that urban legend that they've been told about, got to be sexually active in order to get
Yeah.
a guy. That's probably the
Get as
most
many notches on your belt as you can too. And it doesn't even feel right to women to say that. It doesn't feel right to women to do that. When I taught at the university and they just allowed themselves to sleep around, they would cry. They'd come to me. They'd tell me how cheap and dirty they felt.
yeah.
You can try and convince yourself. And really, that's just one of the lies of the culture.
They have
Women
that.
don't. I want one man who's devoted to me, and I know that when he comes home, he's not been with any other woman. He's just there for me.
Yeah, they have that instinct. Then it's the correct instinct, and they have the wiring and the chemistry to do it. Testosterone is a sex-seeking hormone. estrogen is a sex receptive, but it can be hormone, but it can be very picky, and that's women should be picky. It should be women choose and men chase. That's basically what the way it should
Mm.
be. Um, really interesting. I know we didn't talk about this last time because I think I discovered between last time we talked and now, but there's this interesting research that they did on traditional societies down in Bolivia with again traditional society mean groups of people that haven't really been touched by Western civilization. They had sort of Western clothes, and they had our rifles, but other than that, they're still hunting and gathering. They have chickens in
No
their yard.
televisions.
No, nothing like that. None of it. They have, and the family I'm thinking about has not I think 8 kids at the time that they did this, but they went along with them on a hunt, and they had traditionally bonded because of the way we're talking about, because in their society, there's very strict as far as premarital sex, and all of it's very, very, very formalized. But so they had this correct bond between the mom and the dad, the husband and wife. What they did was they went along with them on a hunt, and they took samples, literally samples. They had them spit, and they took their testosterone samples, and they took oxytocin samples. And what they found out the first time they just did the testosterone, and they found out that when they got the game, when they finally shot the game, it took about 6 or 8 hours to find it, and then get back to the camp, get back to their home. Their testosterone went up when they successfully killed the game. They were expecting that. They actually stayed high all the way back. But then on the second time when they were there, they tested both. They found out that testosterone in the scenario of where they killed the game, and then were taking it back to their wife and family. They're again normally testosterone and oxytocin have a reciprocal trade-off kind of.
Relationship, right?
Yeah, one high testosterone drives down oxytocin and vice versa. What they found out was that the guy's oxytocin was also very high. So both testosterone and oxytocin were high as they were taking their game back for their wife and family. And what I saw from that, what I realized from that is that when the bonding process is done correctly, and when we live by God's design, which again, who knows what they know about God,
Right.
but they were just living the natural law type of a situation. Then we have healthy human hormones. That's probably as healthy of a hormone situation as you can have, because consistently high testosterone is bad for men. There's a lot of different reasons for that.
Yeah.
It's an immunosuppressor, and high estrogen is bad for women because it causes us to have more autoimmune women to have more autoimmune disorders. But having high oxytocin is usually a positive. Usually good. It has all these nice. It relaxes the heart muscle and all of that type of thing. So I say all that to say this, that in its natural state, when you study humans in their natural state, and they follow that design that we've done, up to about 1960, you find that it's very, very positive for both them, the husband, the wife, and their families. And it happens again, as I was saying, naturally. So takeaway, young women, don't play along with the hookup culture, because it's just going to cause you to, as you were saying, as you described, your students, they're all torn up and
Emotional pain, physical pain. I mean, it's just all the way spiritual pain.
yeah, and and a lot of them are not ever getting married. They're ending up childless. They don't want to be childless, but they
Or
are.
many of them have children from various daddies, and that causes so much other grief.
Right. So huge takeaway there. Men also need to know about. I mean, I'm on women what they need about men. Men tend to over perceive women's sexual interest. So, and any of the audience I ever talk to, they start nodding their head. The girls, I say, you ever been around a guy that you just were being, nice to, and thought him as a friend, and he thought it
Thought
was
that you were
more?
advancing sexually.
Yeah, and so they definitely have been there. And then on the other hand, women underperceive men's sexual interest, because a lot of times a man will be sexually interested
He
and
was
she
just
doesn't
being
think.
nice.
Yeah, right. And
He's
so
my
again,
best friend.
right. And it's one of those things where, because of, again, that kind of super charged situation with the male brain, so much sex drive going on there, that they tend to always kind of end up at sex no matter what the situation is. Another one that very important that young women need to know is that when males become aroused, their ethical judgment goes out the window in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that they did the research with computer screens where they
Oh,
had
I
just,
saw that. Keep
yeah,
telling.
just the countryside scenes, and they were asking the guys, would you ever tell a young woman that you're in love with them in order to have sex with them? Would you? No. Would you ever give a date rape drug to a woman to have sex with her? No. Would you ever consider having sex with a 12-year-old girl? No. No, that's disgusting. Then they put pornography on there. And of course, all the answers went to the
Yes.
opposite, to yes. Yeah. So women, again, that's another reason not to have hookup culture going, because you get into these sexually charged situations, and this guy that was a different guy before, now his limbic system's all heated up and his testosterone has risen by 35% or whatever. And so it's just, women don't realize in a lot of cases how changeable men can be when it comes to sex, and how, especially young men at that age, how they're kind of, there's a very, very hair trigger there, for it. So
Yeah.
the again, I'm kind of coming across with this, but this is the research that I've done. The old school, very respectful, very chaste situation where there can be, I got a question at this last university I was at, what about like hugging and that type of thing, and kissing. And I think there's a happy medium on it, because I think we've tried in the past some situations where they tried to absolutely have no absolute, even not even hugging.
Touching
And
it all.
yeah.
Right.
And I think when they've gotten to the wedding situation, wedding night, there've been problems because of that. So I think there's a happy medium, but you definitely stay out of the sexual. You don't do things that purposely arouse
Right. Right.
each other. All right, moving on. Another thing that women need to know is that if they do happen to find themselves in it, and hopefully not, but if they're in a living together situation, or just hookup, casual sex, men's semen raises their psychological state. And what the reason for it is that there are things in men's semen like endorphins, which is a type of opioid, serotonin, prolactin, and even FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone, LH. And those two can make a woman ovulate, ovulate early. So
Which
it
makes you
makes
more likely to get pregnant.
correct. And that makes sense when you're married, but all those things, the two, the man and the wife being bonded that way, and his semen affecting her that way makes all kinds of sense. Again, on the studies that they did on this, it was with women who, like married women that their husbands didn't wear condoms, and unmarried women who were trying to keep from getting pregnant, whose boyfriends did. And there are several levels lower, there are several levels more depressed and anxious than the women who were married and not they weren't using, condoms. So, but that's something that women in a casual sex situation can find themselves, almost like addicted, to this sex act with this guy, and they don't realize why, because it makes them feel better that way. Last thing that women should realize, despite our media and Hollywood and all of that, sports, is that men on average have 80% more upper body muscle fiber. Women have, and they have 50% more lower body muscle fiber. So that's the reason we have the swimmers that are, the transgender women swimmers that are doing so well.
The men who pretend to be women
Correct.
do
Yeah.
better because they've got a bigger upper body.
And yeah, once you're through puberty, that doesn't change, so you're just, it doesn't matter how much estrogen you take, or blockers and that type of thing. So, and also, you know, men on average, and this is something that's not good to think about, but most men on average, if they wanted to, could kill a woman with their bare hands. On average, very few women could ever, even harm a man, let alone kill him with their bare hands. So, in all these situations that women sometimes get themselves into, and again, Hollywood and all of that goes against that
Makes it
these
look
days.
like she's up there doing karate chops and flipping him over, and
Yeah, there's just such a
that's not
mismatch,
real.
such a
Yeah.
mismatch. Yeah, and so again, when you got the abusive situations, it's almost always going physical abuse, almost always going male
Towards
male
the,
to
yeah.
female, and so female need to be aware of that. Now, quickly, Things men need to know about women. Well, this is nothing going to be new to you.
So it's going to
We're-
take like 2 hours for this part, right?
Yeah. Well, we're going to make it quick. I think we better plan on stopping after things men need to know about women because I know we need to not take that too long. Um, uh, this is obvious. Women often tie emotion to sex and desire intimacy in order to bond. Romance and romantic settings are important to women, and young men need to realize this, that the context of their time with these young women is really important and is important to the young women, and more so if they let themselves, kind of absorb it too, and realize that the romance, the bonding that they're going through is the first step, and then the sex will come down the line when it's meant to be, and in the right context, which of course
Right.
is
Right.
marriage. As I said earlier, women generally don't crave sex for sex sake, and they want to get to know this guy, and the quality of the guy is really important to them on more than just the level of the physical.
Well, they
um
want to feel safe, emotionally connected with, protected, loved, all those things. It's all the feelings we want.
yeah, they want the emotional tie, and in hookup culture, the thing that I thought was one of the craziest things about it was
You're
that
not allowed to catch emotions.
exactly, then that was the whole object, was not to catch emotions or
And
catch
if
feeling
he who
catch.
catches the feelings is the loser.
Right. The really weird thing was that I was told that women that don't like somebody, it's okay to have sex with the ones they don't like. And the ones they do like, they're not supposed to have sex with them, these young women. So it's like, okay, the ones that you can have sex with but not catch feelings or catch emotions, just go ahead and have sex with them. I mean, how strange is that?
It just makes me sick. It makes me
Yeah.
sad.
And women use a dual purpose mate selection process, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but they're looking for both good genes, and obviously tall, dark, and handsome, and all that goes along with that, but also character. Character is the other side of it, and what kind of a husband, father they're going to make, and just generally what kind of a person are they. They aren't
Yeah.
looking at body parts of these guys and thinking, like in a lot of cases the guys are thinking, wouldn't I love to
Right.
do this, that, this, and they're thinking of this guy as a whole person, and
Package,
yeah,
right.
as a package, yeah. And so moving on from that, now, as we said earlier, women's, let's do it this way. Men's bonding response is much more complex, as we talked about with the vasopressin and that type of thing. It takes time. It takes,
For him to bond.
yeah. For women, women's sexual response is much more complex than a
So
man's.
when women bond easily, but the sex is more complex. For men, the sex is easier, but the bonding is more complex. Yes?
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
I'm gonna always blonde it down for you because I need to.
No, I'm glad you are, because I want the folks that are listening to this to catch the take home points, and that's
Yeah,
it.
because that's what I want to make sure. I want to share this with my granddaughter. I want to share with my grandsons. I want them to know.
And they need to be able to describe it in straightforward language, especially as
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
young ones that are just going through it. They're in this hot hormonal stage, and they've got all these temptations in front of them. They need to be able to hear it in simple, I think, straightforward and clear language. So that's perfect. Please keep doing that, because
Yeah. Okay,
I'm
I
so
will.
I'm so used to it that I just kind of go through with the language that I'm not used to using. So
Yeah.
let me lay this out for us. Women's sexual response is more complex than a man's, and so women are more complex when it comes to their sexual response. And I always have my college students, raise their thumb. The girls raise their thumb, and I tell them, you ladies are like a thumbprint, basically, and a thumbprint is unique. Each person has their own, print there.
Right.
So what it is that if you scan, Christine, if you scan a woman's pelvis, you're going to find on women a large variety of different innervation patterns. And what I mean by innervation is the nerves literally going from the spine to the different parts of a woman's sexual anatomy, genitalia down there. Now, guys, and again, I'm just going to speak straightforwardly here, because again, this is the best way for people that are listening to be able to explain it to the others that they're going to explain it to. On a guy, the penis and all the areas down there, the testicles, all of that. are pretty much are generally the same, innervation pattern on
From
each.
one man to another is all the
Yeah,
same.
so it's going to kind of work the same, basically from one man to the other. It's going to be the same response pattern. So with the women though, the different and the women, by the way, have more different working parts down there. And so with some women, there's going to be heavier innervation to, the famous one is the clitoris, but there's also going to be some that are going to have heavy innervation to the vulva and vagina. And there's going to be others that are going to have heavy innervation to even the perineum, which is the space between the anus and the vulva. And then some are going to have innervation to the anus that is going to make them more sexually stimulated there. Those are very rare, and I'm not recommending anal sex by any means because
Right. It
there's
goes against
seven.
the church teaching.
Yeah, but just to lay out the science of this, um, so in general, for women and men to be able to have some compatibility as far as women achieving a state of satisfaction alongside the men who have a tendency to readily achieve the state of satisfaction. Once again, it screams marriage to me as opposed to hooking up. And that's what the statistics tell us too, is that in the hookups, it's something like only 15% of women ever reach climax in a hookup situation. It's up there like in the 60s, I think, for men. But you take it a married situation where the man knows his wife very, very well and he knows her sexual response, then it goes up to like 85 to 90 for the men and something like 75, for the women. Women, for whatever reason, I guess it's what we talked about earlier, they're just not as supercharged sexually generally as men are. But when you have a very familiar couple, and again, I think the security of marriage helps this because again, the research shows that
You feel safer emotionally, you're more likely to open your heart, open your body, open your everything to this person.
exactly, and
It's
and
about
and
safety.
yeah, exactly, and technically, a woman along those lines has to be able to get their autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic and sympathetic parts of the autonomic nervous system. Their parasympathetic has to be able to kick into gear, and they got to be able to relax in order to be able to reach that state where they can reach where they can reach orgasm. And you said it perfectly that they have to feel safe. They have to feel safe, and they have to get to the point where nothing else necessarily is on their mind as far as like things that they're worried about. They're
Right.
so all
And
that
if I'm in a
against.
hookup and the guy just wants to get his thing, he doesn't care about me. I mean, if I get one, great, but let me do my thing. Now, if he's married to me and, truly loves me, so I'm saying this because I'm picturing the young people I'm going to share this with, the teenagers and things. Um, we know how to stimulate guys. Just get naked, they're ready. I mean, because they're all visually stimulated, they're ready to go. And how to climax, pretty easy. But for the women, it's like some need to be touched in one spot, some need to be touched in another. Some take 20 minutes, some take 18. So, because I know between, I talked to other women, including, I'm not going to get personal here, but there's time, a number of minutes that we would always know it would take for in
Yeah.
my response, and then my sisters, we've talked about it, other women I've talked to, some are 18, some are 20, some are, but it seems to be the same for that person. And so your husband gets used to knowing, okay, now you're getting close, or I need to do this. And so I really love what you're saying because it speaks to love. It's like, and go back to the man's desire to provide and protect. And I've said this to some of my couples, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but he not only wants to provide for her financially, he wants to go out and hunt and give her food for her and the family. I want to provide, I want to protect, but he wants to provide sexually too. And I've had men go, yes, it's like, if he thinks she's had an orgasm, then he's fine. But if he doesn't know, he's okay. He's still going to have an orgasm. But if he knows that I did that to you and I'm able to provide that, and, caveman, I am man, look what I did for pretty lady. It actually makes the man happier because he was able to provide something physically for his wife. Am I off on that? Am I saying it right?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. And then that just goes all together there once again with the great value of marriage and what it does for a couple. And particularly for the women in the women's sexual response, because what you're describing there very, very well is the conditions, the context for a woman to almost always, or most of the time, reach sexual satisfaction, where they almost never, reach sexual satisfaction in any kind of a hookup, casual sex, friends with benefits, you name it,
Which is just so
polyamory.
sad. They're just used.
Yeah, yeah, they're used, and like you said, the male will generally find his way there, and with the young males, as we both know, it takes almost next to nothing, to to for them to get to that point. They
Like
get
an
there
average of like, isn't it average of like 2 minutes for the average man, or is that too fast?
for a young man. Yeah,
For a
and
young man, it's average of 2 minutes and he can
yeah,
climax.
yeah, and just think about it. I mean, they're that's happening nocturnally. They're having the young men, young boys. 17 is the age of the highest testosterone levels that a boy ever, a
Will
male ever
have.
experiences. So, and there's something in that process that I think God, for it meant to be, because I think that really in the old days and again, the good old days, where it was required and everybody just expected to have to be married before sex was going to occur. It drove that sex drive drove these young men to make their mark, as far as getting work and becoming a respected member of the community. And again, you look back in the marriage records, and a lot of times the men were, this is a while back, hundreds of years ago, they'd be 23, 24, 25, 26, and the girls in a lot of cases would be later teen.
17,
Yeah,
18, right?
17,
Yeah.
18. So there'd be about a 7 or 8 year difference between the two. But it wasn't that the boys couldn't perform. I mean, obviously they were right in there as far as all that goes. But it was that testosterone isn't just a sex hormone. It's also a drive, as far as general drive hormone. It's an ambition hormone. It's a
Yeah.
winning or losing hormone. So um, the purpose is there, as long when things were driving themselves, when we had the kind of society where marriage was
There were
accepted.
controls on it, right?
Yeah, where and it was channeled like the banks of a river, and it was going in the direction of the banks of the river. And again, God's design, as we were taught, from the Bible, etc. Then it all drove things in a really positive direction, and not only that, but the younger girls, getting married at 17, 18, 19, and sometimes early 20s, they were at the peak of their fertility. 19 to 29 is the peak of women's fertility, and 24 to 26 is the male peak of fertility. So having children wasn't a problem for them. And of course, we have a lot of couples these days that when they finally do get married and want to have
Struggle
children,
to have kids.
they're in their 30s, already. And really a woman's fertility goes off a cliff once they hit from 32 to 35, they lose half of their fertility. So
Wow.
yeah, but yeah, no, you described that very extremely well. And again, that take home is on the bonding of men. It's very complex, and something that needs to be carefully brought along. And then with women's sexual response, then it's the same thing. It's more complex and needs to be carefully brought along, because
Yeah.
you gotta get in. Her brain has to um safe. She has to feel safe, and she has to, not only that, I think she has to feel love in most cases. She has to
Well,
feel
that
love
is
from,
safe for us.
yeah, but
If
it's
I
both.
feel loved by you, I'm safe in your arms. I'll do anything for you.
Right.
And that, so for women, it is the same. It's like, you make me feel so loved. You make me feel so safe. When I'm working with these couples who are struggling, married 10, 15, 20, 30 years, just found out the spouse is cheating. Even if they're not cheating, it's like, I don't feel safe with you. I don't feel
Right.
safe with you financially. I don't feel safe with you that you're going to say the right things. I don't feel safe with you in many ways. And actually most of the time they talk to me, it's not even about sexually. I just don't feel safe with you to protect me and to love me.
Mhm.
So that if I don't feel that, how can I emotionally connect with you? Because if I don't feel safe, that means I feel unsafe. If I feel unsafe, how would I bond? How would I want you in my body? How would I want to submit myself, my mind, my heart? So yeah, to women, love and safety are so synonymous,
Yeah.
you know?
I agree completely.
Yeah.
And again, that's really the crux of many of our most challenging things in society. And getting back to that realization, I think is such has so much potential as far as healing so many things in our society. This young man, young woman juncture in life, and having courtship go down the pathway that's the positive ones that we're describing. It's the core of the culture, really, because everything else, as far as obviously, Christian belief system or not, is the most important decision. But the next most important decision that we make in our lives is whether to get married, and then who to get married to.
And then
So
who,
those two
right?
things. Last thing here, and then, I mean, if you want, we can stop for a day. As far as men,
Can I clarify real quick then?
sure.
Because since I'm getting as clear as, so when we were talking about the nocturnal emission, because I'm thinking teenage males will be watching this. I know a lot of high schools and colleges and parents that are probably going to do that. So I
Mhm.
just want to be clear again. A boy shouldn't feel bad, for boys that, because, the church teaches not to masturbate, but this happens naturally. So what you're saying is, their testosterone is going so high because it's the highest stage in their life anyway. B, when I'm competing, my testosterone goes up. B, when I'm competing for a job and really trying to, work hard, my testosterone is going up. So what I was hearing you say is that's kind of like the body's way to emit this excess semen and sperm, because if he's not getting married for, 3, 4, 5 years and he's not going to have sex for that period of time, the body needs to purge it on occasion, right? There's no way for young men to control that, I would suspect, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what needs to be said, because it's a process, it's a natural process because of the age that they're at, and I would say that what you're saying about emitting the sperm that and the semen, that it has a shelf life for a certain amount of time too. So
Right.
as far as being fresh or not, and as far as being potent or not. So yeah, it's a natural process, and it's one of those things where the boys should not feel bad about that at all. But the total take home on that is that that's one sign of how much sex drive they have at that stage.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, they're getting erections at times during
That
that
are
time period.
inappropriate, and they're having to learn how to control that
Yeah,
too.
and at times it's just absolutely almost for no reason at all. I mean, just a young woman will walk by and they'll smell their cologne, or whatever, and just the not anything that the young woman is necessarily doing wrong as far as the way they're dressing, that type of thing. Although, I mean, there's also the thing of the way our society has women particularly dress, and then so there's a lot of challenging.
Let's do our next show on
Yeah,
modesty, because that
yeah.
was something we women totally misunderstood, and I know. So let's do our next one on that. It's going to be huge.
That sounds good. And the sexual revolution, let's say, and its effect on modesty, and really the effect on all these things that we just talked about today. And at some point we can come back and talk about, and maybe we can work this into that, what women need to know about themselves, and then what men need to know about themselves, because it relates to this. But last thing on the women, what men need to know about women, especially young men, this. Women are very upset by sexual aggression. It's much more offensive to them than even verbal and physical abuse. So we're talking about sexual aggression. On the other hand, men are less than half as upset by sexual aggression, and some say they even like it on a woman's part. And this is one last thing that's really important little figure here for them. Um, on campuses, I've run into this situation, and I'm totally on the side of being against rape culture and being against any kind of non-consensual sex. But 80%, the research shows that 80% of non-consensual sex, so that would be, sexual assault, rape, all of it, and fondling even, 80% of that happens within a hookup situation. So it's on campuses. And so most of it is not the guy in the parking lot hiding behind the bushes and jumps out and gets the girl. It's mostly in these situations that we were talking about earlier, where they get, they're together, in the young woman's mind, maybe there's this scenario of what they're doing and what's going on, what's going to happen that evening. There's another scenario in the guy's head. And that's where, again, 80% of the non-consensual sex happens. So, and he doesn't know it, but again, a lot of this is because of movies and porn. Unfortunately, if they've watched porn, they think women like to be, forced into things, and the women like
Oh,
rock.
the spank me mentality.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's just so diabolical because I don't know any women except for those that really have, I've had to work with because they've had some trauma
Mhm. Yeah.
sexually.
Young
I've
trauma.
not met any healthy women who want that. They want the tenderness. They want to feel safe again. We go back to that and protect
Yeah. So
spiritual.
that's another thing that men need to young men particularly. Most of this is really applicable to young men because they come up thinking, oh, well, men like, I mean, women like this because I see it, I
On
see it on
TV.
and even like the rape fantasies that women, like rape, and
It's
because,
so sick.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to, we can stop there and then we can come back to the subject. Tell me the subject one more time that you were thinking of for
We're
the
going to
next.
get you on next month to talk about modesty and how men and women see each other differently. Because I've had such big arguments about, well, women should be able to walk around naked and a man shouldn't touch her. Correct. He shouldn't touch her. But come on, we've gone so far to this feminist movement where men have all the responsibility and women have none. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you have responsibility as well. So we'll talk about modesty in the church and modesty and the way we dress. Oh my gosh, I have stories because I taught at a, 40,000 population urban university, and the things that people wore made me blush. So, but
And
so to sum up today's show, then, Dr. Malone, um, name one thing you would have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today. You were rich with knowledge.
thank you. I would have particularly the young women go down the pathway of non-marital chastity and not feel bad about it and be um, proud of the fact that that's their instinct, that's their sexual nature, and they're following it. And it's going to force things in relationships into the right context. So especially if more and more of them do that, then it's gonna get our society back to the pathway that it's
Yeah.
supposed to be on. The guardrails have been taken off, and there's been so many car wrecks, so to speak, in our society. But women have that power; they have that superpower to go down that pathway. Out of 3 million sexually reproducing species, there's 9 million approximately altogether, but there's 3 million sexually reproducing. And out of those 3 million humans, as far as we know, the females are the only ones that have the power to override their
Regulate.
override their ovulatory signal and not seek sex, when they're ovulating. So,
Mm.
um, I believe God created us that way for a purpose, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah.
That's how we've been able to develop the brains we have with our children take the longest to develop. So having a husband and wife, and then having for mom and dads, and then babies growing up, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's been that way for millennia in the past, and we're just now at the situation where, again, it's gone back and forth a few times in the last
Yeah.
350 years, but we're just at the situation where we're having so many people tell our young people, especially young women, don't follow your natural instincts, and telling young men not to be chivalrous and not to
It's
treat women
just
with respect.
crazy.
So yeah, that would be it.
Wow. 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 So much good stuff. So, where can people find you if they want to have you come in to do speaking? I know your next book is coming out. What's your next
Mhm.
book entitled?
Women's Sexual Wellness is what it's entitled. So,
Okay.
and I'm doing it in conjunction with the pro-life movement. So, it's going to be coming out, like I said, I think in April. And
Well,
that could
maybe
be,
let's just wait for that book to come out and we'll do that and put it all together.
yeah,
We'll talk
there's,
about that when we go off the air.
okay.
So, if they want to get that, how do they find the book? How do they find you? We can wait.
You can find me, and the book is still, it's at the very end of the publication process. So they're putting the citations to everything. So, that will be accessible, like I said, I think about the middle of April.
Okay.
And they can find me though, meanwhile, on my website, drjoemalone.com. So it's just DrJoeMalone. Dot,
We'll put
Dr.
a
Joe.
click right here in the show notes. So just go
Okay.
below and they'll find that.
Yeah. And there's also, on social media, we have groups called on Facebook and Instagram called Romance Revolt. And what we're trying to do there is get
Romance what?
revolt.
Revolt. Got
Yeah,
it.
so it's two R's, romance, revolt. And what we're encouraging young people to do there is to go down the pathway we were talking about here today. Go down that chaste, respectful pathway and abandon hookup culture and find romance culture is what we're advocating there. And then we've got one more, sexiq.org. It's the nonprofit that my wife and I founded. So sexiq.org, very simple, sex and then IQ.
Well,
And
we'll
then,
have them all in the show notes.
yeah, that'll be great. Yeah. So yeah, if any of you want to, anybody's listening to this wants to ask me anything, you can just send me a message on the website. There's a way to do that. Again, drjoemalone.com website. And I've had some, next time we're together, Christine, I've had some really interesting messages from young men actually, that actually speak to what we were talking about today, and we'll speak next time
Would
to
you be
it as well.
inclined to read a couple of them without names on the air and answer the questions on the air?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be
I
happy to
think that'd
because
be a great way to do it.
yeah, and I think again, I think it speaks directly to your the modesty topic. Yeah, you'll see. It's going to be very, I think, interesting for folks to see what this young man is saying.
For you guys watching, you can see how we do this. My brain is going. I cannot stop. I could keep talking forever, but for the sake of time, we're going to put a semicolon here and pick it back up. I am so grateful to have Dr. Joe Malone and his intense knowledge in the subject and his willingness to talk about something that, A, is not exactly easy to roll off someone's tongue, but in a society that trips you up, twists it, perverts it, and then demonizes you for speaking truth. So, Dr. Joe Malone, you are just such a gem for going down this field and being able to be vocal about it, and then combining it with the Catholic faith and showing us how God's word and God's path is really perfect. Putting it together, spiritually, emotionally, physically, sexually, it's all tied together. Follow Dr. Malone on the links below. And please, if you have a young teenager, if you are a teenager, if you're a 20 something, if you're actually anyone of any age, but you think that young people in your life need to know this, and this is stuff you don't want to talk about your kid about an orgasm. I certainly didn't want to talk to my teenager about it. Send them this show. This might help them understand the things that you can't seem to teach them. Let me and Dr. Joe Malone get embarrassed about it. Get embarrassed. And then follow me, please, on breakfastwithbacon.com. Sign up to get my monthly newsletter. I have amazing guests, as you see, like the one right here. And also, as my books are coming out, I want you to be the first to know about it. Like and subscribe on my Facebook, Rumble, Instagram, and I think there's one more that I'm forgetting, YouTube. And so you can be abreast of all the shows as they come out. I think that's all we have for today. What about you, Dr. Malone?
I think you summed it up very, very well, and you're exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
people can put this tape in front and other tapes that we do in front of young people, and I think it'll be very informative to them. And I think it's all, well, I know it's all good information. It's all scientifically based, so it's a great way to communicate with your teenager or a young adult.
And if you teenagers are too embarrassed to ask mom and dad after that, you can contact me. I'll connect with Dr. Malone, Christine at breakfastwithbacon.com, and just post your questions there. And we will, if you tell us to, now answer them anonymously. So
Yeah.
that's it for now. All right, we got to go. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. Thank you so much for watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I want to remind you always to live your life
Sunny side up.